So, welcome to Pub in the Desert, where we bring you honest, curious conversations about faith and the human experience. I'm Matthias Miller, here with my co-host, Kevin David Krittner. And before we dive in, I want to recap our three guiding principles. We're going to do them backwards this time for fun. Third, we don't come with preset agendas. We're here to let conversations unfold naturally and follow where authenticity leads us. Second, we approach difficult topics with genuine curiosity, and we aren't here to win arguments, we're here to understand. And first, we believe that you don't need to be fixed, you need to be known, and we believe that love is knowing and being known. So, with that in mind, go ahead and pull up a chair, grab a drink, and let's explore what union looks like with God, with others, and with ourselves. And so, Kevin, we started talking just a little bit about, is there any launching pad? I thought about it this morning. I was thinking right before this that it's fascinating to have two guys whose daily conversations seem are so vastly different from each other.
Right. Oh man.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, they're pretty diverse.
pretty diverse. So, so I'm curious, what are some things? Well, I've been thinking some around the idea of, oh man, much of my conversation or my exploration over this past week has been digging into how much of marketing and branding have been very tactical and surface based,
Hmm.
and how many of the business problems actually stem from the human, and not all of these exterior things that we like to put on top of it. And it's become very disconcerting to me how vulnerable I am to being sold. On it. And I suppose this is just a level of awareness, but you become aware that your first level of awareness is, I mean, you might not have, it may just be repeated patterns and behaviors that you don't like, and you start unwinding further back into the process. And then you're like, wait, I'm buying into somebody else's logic because they need me to buy into their logic for me to be able to pay them something. And so that's been a very kind of interesting exploration over this past week. There's also something which dovetails into a second conversation and dovetails into a third piece, and that maybe will be our launching off point.
There you go.
The the second piece is I also get to work with and some of this conversation has come down to expertise. How do you define and quantify expertise? And I think the problem with expertise, whenever you're an expert in something, is that I mean, there's the progression of the conscious and unconscious competence and incompetence. Like you're unconsciously incompetent. You don't know that you can't do something, and then you become aware that it's a possibility, and you there's conscious competence and then or incompetence. Then you learn how to do it. You have to think about doing it, which is conscious competence. And then at the very head, the tail of that, there's unconscious competence. And one of the intriguing things, and one of the baffling things for people who actually spend large amounts of time mastering any kind of thing, or even not mastering, just learning, like, and this is across all fields, is that you end up in a unconscious competence, and you become blind to your own ability and your own perspective. And And if you're not actively engaging with people who are in need of the perspective that you have to offer, you end up kind of hoarding that and not really doing anything with it. And then the third piece, if we want to get into this, there was an interesting conversation, as of the time of this recording, there was an interesting conversation this week on our thread um, on our Substack about the Johari window, which ties into
Mhm.
competence and self-awareness and things like that. But anyway, there's like my verbal vomit to get this whole thing.
I like it. Yeah. Yeah. How do you define expertise? Like, I think that's a good place to start. Like, you look at people in your life who you would consider experts. How did you come to the conclusion that they were an expert?
Well, okay, so let's start with definition. Let's start by scoping the problem. I think expertise is very limited to a very specific area. And I would just define expertise as having spent a sufficient amount of time. Well, I mean, expertise comes down to both narrow scope and depth. Well, it's wow, that's really fascinating. There's a sense in which for expertise to occur, you have to narrow your focus. There's a sense in which for expertise to occur, you have to have a broad focus within that or
Right.
a breadth of experience. So there's actually a narrowing and a widening that is both part of expertise. And I would just say typically it comes down to having put in the time, effort, and energy, whether through their own experiences or the experiences of other people, to gain mastery to recognize the patterns within a specific sphere of life.
Right. Right.
So somebody who is an expert in building houses, for example, means they've spent time with people who build houses. They've built houses themselves. They've seen the full scope of everything that goes into building a house.
Yeah.
And and within the context of building houses, the more houses they've done, the more varied the types of houses, the more those types of things, the greater their level of expertise. That's breaking it down into a very, I guess, technical terms, perhaps.
Mm, yeah. As you're talking, I was thinking Malcolm Gladwell talks about the concept of 10,000 hours.
Right.
Like, there's to be an expert in anything, you have to spend 10,000 hours doing it. And he uses the example, one of the examples he uses is the Beatles. Like, as they were starting to play and gel and all that kind of stuff, they would fly over to Germany and they would play these long, long, long sets in essentially German bars and strip clubs. And they would play for hours and hours and hours and hours together. And that was their expertise. They played for hours and hours and hours together. And so they came to know each other's movements, each other's tone of voice, that like they just knew what the crowd was saying, what they were feeling, all of that kind of stuff. And I wonder what is contained in that, or the house builder, 10,000 hours building houses, carpentry, plumbing, electrical, although you subcontract most of that, but you learn all of that stuff. What is contained in that 10,000 hours that makes you an expert? And we could look at it vocationally, which is really interesting. You could also look at it internally. What are you an expert in? What have you spent 10,000 hours doing that you're an expert in that you may not even be aware you're an expert in?
Okay. Very interesting very intriguing question. Very I can't find the word. Antagonizing question. Um
Yes, provoking question.
provoking question. I mean the worst part of it is how am I supposed to know? I mean,
What if, so let's say, for example, um, you're raised in nation A. We won't point out any sort of nation, just nation A. And there's a racial divide within that nation. And you're raised in the majority group. And that majority group has a thought process, has a view of the world, has a way of seeing things, understanding things. So you've been conditioned, you've been trained for well over 10,000 hours that this is the way we see the world. And then you have an experience somewhere in your maybe mid 20s to mid 30s. that conflicts with that worldview. But you're an expert in that worldview. What do you do?
It's a great question.
And this may lead somewhere. We don't have to dive into this right now, but it may lead dovetail into this. We're talking about dovetails. So just recently, there was an article uh, written in a scientific journal about a photon and about how scientists were able to isolate a photon, which is essentially just a packet of energy that light is made of. And light is fascinating because it moves as packets of energy and it also moves as a wave at the same time. Fascinating. They were able to isolate one of those photons, and they found within that photon 37 separate dimensions,
Hmm.
which the science of it still beyond me. So I'm just reporting what I read and what I understood. Within that, 37 different dimensions. There's space within that photon for 37 different experiences of that photon. And I started to think, what if, what if that's the nature of reality? That there are, and let's say infinite dimensions. Science can't prove that yet, but let's say there's just infinite. If God is infinite, there's infinite dimensions, right? Infinite dimensionality. What if, and I promise I'm bringing this back. What if prior to the fall, there was this infinite dimensionality, which was union with God? And after the fall, we took the infinite dimensionality, and we compressed it down into three. How would that affect the way you see the world?
So, so the best, are you familiar with the novel Flatlands? I think that's what
Yes.
it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so for the listeners, I had a friend of mine growing up who's an absolute math geek. And he introduced me to it, and I think I might have tried to read it. I don't know, but for those listening, and I don't even remember the author, but for those listening, it's the story of two-dimensional shapes,
Hmm.
and the problems that they face. So you can imagine the lines going through. Like, how do you see the line coming? Like, unless you step to the side, and if you're a circle,
Hmm.
watch out for the line. Like, um, and that's probably one of the best ways that we have of trying to imagine what compressed dimensions are like. Although we have other image, I mean, we have other pictures of that. I mean, simply put, we have video as a time dimension on a photo. Um,
Hmm.
so imagine, so to that point, it's not difficult to imagine a extreme richness of experience that where basically the color gets turned down in some capacity.
Right. Yeah, it's like Wizard of Oz, right? Like it goes from black and white to color.
Yeah.
Like, and all of a sudden, oh wow. Like the outflow of this article is essentially what we're seeing is everything is one. Everything is interconnected. It's quantum entanglement, essentially.
Yeah.
And yet, at the fall, separation was introduced. Division was introduced. Disconnection was introduced. But we were never meant to live that way. We were meant to live by the reality of the very nature of the universe, which physics is now proving. We were all meant to live together in union. And that creates the infinite dimensions that we experience. Now imagine a heart that is made for infinite dimension being forced to live in a 3D world.
Hmm.
I was talking about this with a buddy who's a programmer and a science geek and all that kind of stuff. And he loves video games. and he was talking about the video game Legend of Zelda. And it came out like the original one came out when I was in junior high. Loved it, just obsessed with it, played with it. But it's all 2D. It's a map, and you're just walking around the map. It's all 2D. And the most recent one is what they call an open world. You can go anywhere and do anything at any time whenever you want. And you look at this map, and the part that you inhabit is lit up, but the rest of it's black until you explore into that other territory. Then it lights up. Like he's like, that's what it feels like to me. That's what this science paper is talking about. He's like, that's what it feels like. Now imagine we started to talk about Samson last week,
Yep.
and I've been fascinated by the story. But what if Samson was designed for this infinite dimensional connection, and his whole world was compressed into 3D, and he has this longing for this infinite dimensional connection, and it's just not possible. It's just not possible here. The way I'm trying to get it.
Right.
What's that going to do to your heart? It's gonna not it's gonna cause a lot of pain
Yeah.
that I know that I know that I know that I know that there's something more than this. And yet I can't seem to find it here. Like C.S. Lewis said in Mere Christianity, if I find in myself desires this world can't satisfy, the only conclusion I can come to is I wasn't made for here.
Right.
And so like and here's the tie back in to me is like in that space, I have to become an expert in something. My energy has to go somewhere.
Right.
And maybe I become an expert in trying to figure this out. Or maybe I become an expert in trying to numb that ache of disconnection. And maybe I numb that ache into for of from the disconnection and what society would call a very healthy way. I make money and it numbs the ache for a time. And I get wildly celebrated because I'm a business leader or because I'm an artist or because I'm a pastor or I'm because whatever. But it's all a numbing. It's a numbing of disconnection. It's the numbing of going from infinite dimensional connection to three-dimensional connection. A fascinating thing, this may be a side note, is within this paper, they actually say like it's using the entanglement and essentially saying that these three particles that exist, they cannot exist apart from each other. They're all entwined, they're all one, they're all indwelt. There is no separateness. And it is the best description of the Trinity I've ever heard. Because every other description, while trying to describe mutual indwelling, describes three separate things.
Right.
So they all fall short. Ice, water, steam, three separate things, three separate experiences. This is saying, no, these three things are actually one thing.
Hmm.
Cannot disconnect. There is no disconnection. There is no otherness in it. And that made so much sense to me as far as the pain in the world, because we're living as if there is an otherness, but there is no otherness. We were made for infinite dimensional connectivity.
So what is this? So from how does this light analogy connect to man before the fall? Adam and Eve with God. What was their experience?
I think only one human being in human history can answer that question. And I think it's the reason why he came, was to show what that union looks like. He's the only one who knows. I could put words on it, but they would fall short because it's an ineffable experience. What would it mean to be unseparated, connected, and the words just fall short, to God? What would that feel like? And maybe we have moments of it, but sustainably, no human being, with the exception of one, knows what that feels like. What do we do with that?
What do we do with this with that? This might be a completely both sacrilegious and unanswerable question, but it begs the question: uh, if did what did God experience with that separation?
Well, maybe, and this may be, again, an answer, or this may be sacrilegious, but if we're made in God's image and we experience emotions and he experienced emotions, all what it means to be alive and we're made in his image, and I can only imagine that the pain that we feel in separation, he feels that on an infinite level. Because our pain of separation is just about us.
Mhm.
And the thing where, whether it's a person or a pet or God, whatever it is, but
Right.
to that thing, but he feels it for all of humanity because he's outside of time. So all of humanity that ever was and ever will be, he feels that, in my opinion, and that he chooses to love. His response is love, is knowing and being known.
So then the question to your point, jumping back, is there's kind of two elements to it. One's a very almost fatalistic perspective, depressing perspective, which is basically like, look, you're kind of screwed on this side. Um, there's also the question of do you want 10,000 hours in exploring what union looks like with him?
That really is, when you boil it all down, you take away all the extraneous conversations, the rabbit trails. It really is a fascinating question, right? What do you want and using 10,000 hours as a metaphor for a life, what do you want your 10,000 hours to be? the lament of disconnection, the victimhood mindset, the all those things, or do you want to spend those 10,000 hours experiencing what union looks like? What do you want? That really is, when you boil it down, that really is it, right? What do you want? And maybe the Sermon on the Mount, more specifically, the Beatitudes, are Jesus's way of creating a roadmap to union. Maybe that's what it is. Can you imagine? I had this thought yesterday. A guy who comes and does what he does and says what he says, not at some point giving a very direct teaching about why he is here. Laying it out clearly. This is why I'm here. This is what I'm talking about. Go back, I challenge you, me, listeners, go back and read the Beatitudes through the lens of separation and union and see what he's saying.
Mm.
Blessed are the poor, blessed are the weak, blessed are the hungry who hunger and thirst for righteousness, all those. Go back and read through those through the lens of the dichotomy between separation and union and see what you see there.
That's fascinating.
Because that statement, the first one, blessed are the poor, it makes zero sense to the three-dimensional mind, which has been raised on separation, competition, winners and losers, right, wrong, good, bad, healthy, unhealthy. It's been raised on that, just steeped in it. And then you say, blessed are the poor.
Mm. So explain more. Like, just starting with the first one, the poor in spirit.
Yeah. So if you look at it through the lens, and this is all just my opinion and my thoughts free flowing right now. So certainly open to conversation about it. If you look at it through the lens of separation and union, blessed are the poor, the ones who know that they are separated, who have felt the pain of the separation, the ache, the longing for something more, because you know that you're separated.
Mhm.
And you cannot get back to union until you recognize the fact that you have been separated. It's like the first step in 12-step programs, right? You have to admit there's a problem.
So there's a sense in which you could say, jumping back to part of our prior conversation, blessed are those whose numbing has failed.
Yes. Yes.
Blessed
Blessed
are,
is the alcoholic who's reached the end of their rope and has decided their life has become unmanageable, who has hit rock bottom.
because they've been blessed with the breaking of the illusion of separation, of the elusive promises.
Yes.
Blessed are those who mourn, who have reached the limits of, well, I mean, even there, the numbing of pleasure seeking, of whatever it is that
Makes you feel better.
makes you feel better.
You've
It's
reached
going to
the
be
end of
okay.
that rope. Yeah. You've reached the end of that rope. You've gone as far as you can go. Talk about shattering a three-dimensional reality. Rock bottom is the shattering of a three-dimensional reality. I've done all these things. I've done all the right things.
Mhm.
This is the rich young ruler, right? I've done all the right things. What more do I need to do? What made him ask that question? If he had done all the right things and it worked for him, would he have approached Jesus with that question?
Yeah, clearly not. I mean, I- okay, so, and as much as we throw the guy under the bus, that he never,
Poor guy. He
poor
doesn't even get
guy,
a name.
yeah, didn't even get a name. Well, maybe that was his, maybe that was the kindness of, I don't know.
Not throwing him on the front page.
But isn't it at least, it's sad that he never said yes to the invitation, but isn't it intriguing that he still wanted to know? Like, there's in that question, the healthy part of that question. Oh, okay, the unhealthy part of that question is, how do I fix myself so that I can actually have all this stuff? The healthy part of the question is, why have I done all of this stuff and it's still not working?
Right, right. And
Wait,
do we know, and this is a giant presupposition. This is a step off into the darkness here, but do we know that his no stayed a no?
listen, logic says we have no idea.
We have no idea. Maybe he said no, and that question haunted him still. He's still looking for an answer to that question. And that's where the Holy Spirit does his best work, is in that space where the question still haunts you.
There are a few things that will keep you up at night and wake you up in the morning and hound you throughout the day and make you do all kinds of crazy antics than a well-formed, well-articulated, well-timed, hit the nail on the head question.
Right. Right. So I mean just to say, like, do we know that his no stayed a no? My thought process is, as a human being, it would take a lot of ego for that no to stay a no. And that would bring about a lot of self-destructive behavior.
Right.
And so maybe that ego manifestation and the self-destructive behaviors led somewhere holy, to the poorness, to the mourning, to the hunger and thirst. We don't know that.
We don't know that.
And maybe that's why, one reason why Jesus doesn't chase after him, because he wasn't going to accept the teaching of a teacher. So maybe he needed a different teacher.
Well, there's also people who I I would never admit to being one of them who are so stubborn in their ways, so determined. So, you know, sometimes it takes a fairly forthright confrontation and encounter with the truth. And
Mhm.
then there's a time delay on it, like until you're really willing to accept it. Um,
Right.
And maybe Jesus just recognized that there wasn't that it wasn't going to be productive to try to get him to speed up that process.
No.
I mean, there's so many pictures in scripture of analogies of planting and watering and God giving the increase. And mm, yeah,
Well, there's an interesting contrast there, right? Like Jesus is teaching in Matthew 18 about how we handle disagreements.
Mhm.
You know, how he says, go and talk to him. If he listens, great. If he doesn't listen, bring another. Great. Doesn't listen, bring the elders, bring authorities within to it. Doesn't listen, okay. So there's that methodology, but in this situation, Jesus doesn't use that methodology. Because this man comes and asks him, hey, what else do I need to do? And he says, well, that's awesome. Now sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and come follow me. There's a problem between them. He's asking, what do I get out of this? And Jesus is talking about relationship. There's a
Right,
disconnection.
right.
So he has this conversation, and the young man doesn't listen. He doesn't embrace what Jesus says, and he walks away, and Jesus doesn't chase after him. He lets him go.
So why the difference in
By
it?
the difference.
There's another thought that's occurring to me as you're sharing, which is we've never talked. It talks about him walking away sad, um, which is actually a reversion to what we can anticipate happened at some point earlier in his experience, more than likely, where there was a sense of disconnection that he felt that he couldn't fill and tried to fill through whatever means, through
Hmm.
wealth, through economic productivity. And there is almost this like Jesus is giving him the gift of mourning again, taking him right back to the problem that he had tried to solve. And um, he's face to face with it. So to that question, why? I mean, I think a lot of people look at accountability as the kind of thing of like we want to and make a promise that you want relationship so that when you don't want relationship, we can force relationship on you.
Right.
And that's sometimes how we use Matthew, we as people use Matthew 18.
Hmm. Right. And we've taken the words of Jesus and we've turned it into an assault on free will.
Right.
Because how it practically plays out, at least in my experience and things I've seen, is not go to your brother, have a conversation with him. If he listens to you, then we're all good. It's if he agrees with you, then we're good. If there's some sort of submission that happens, we're all good. That's how it's played out. And then if he doesn't submit, done with you. You don't exist. I'm handing you over into Satan's hands. Excommunication, all these kinds of things. You're a heretic, you're whatever.
S- Okay, so I mean, one of the challenges in these cases is to stay on the side of truth, not your own side.
Yes.
Uh, That's the really difficult thing. I had a very interesting conversation with a client over the past week. We agreed fairly vehemently on direction. And when at one point I'm like, I don't mind, you know, exploring the path that you're suggesting. like investigating it. I still think you're wrong. I'm open to be proven wrong. And um, I think they were almost taken aback by, I don't know if this is healthy or not, but by the strength of my opinion. And it was informed by previous experience, but it would have been very, it could be, can be very easy to stick on the side of, I know what I'm talking about. And instead of having the patience to rewind, let's lay out all the pieces and let's take a look at what we have and let's take a look at how this is going to play out. And if I'm proven wrong, I'm proven wrong. That's great. Like let's land on the side of truth. Um, um, that also becomes very difficult for people who lead by consensus. Well, for on two things. One, leading by consensus and leading by authoritarian rule don't work in either of those cases. Because if you lead by authoritarian rule, what do you do when somebody disagrees with you? Like, you have to go find a bunch of yes people to surround
Mm-hmm.
yourself with, and
Mm-hmm.
which puts you in an incredibly vulnerable position because okay, there's so many threads to this. Is there union in yes people? Is there even union in decision making by consensus? Because um, like, isn't conflict a necessary path, or isn't conflict inevitable when you allow free will and independent thought in relationship?
Wow. You just
I don't know.
hit
What are your
something
thoughts?
sacred. You just hit something sacred there. Like, how do these dynamics play out with free will, with Paul's admonition to seek peace wherever possible? Like, how do these things play out? I can tell you how they play out in the human realm. We've all
Yeah,
seen it way too often.
yeah.
But how is it intended to play out in the light of union? And I think that the key is, and there's so much depth and breadth to this conversation, I think the key is humility. Humility, by the definition of what we talked about before, the desire to learn.
Right, right.
So if you're sitting across from me and we're having this conversation about the direction of the podcast, and you're adamant about one way, and I'm adamant about one way, those are very arrogant opinions.
Mhm.
They are not humble opinions. No, I'm not saying you can't feel strongly about something. You most certainly can, and you probably should. But if I cannot hear what you're saying and listen to you and take pains to understand what you're saying and process it, and then you do the same, we're gonna have conflict.
Right.
Like, I remember I was in a class in college somewhere and was taught by a Catholic guy. Forget what he. I think he was a. No, he wasn't a Jesuit. I think he was a Dominican. Anyways, doesn't matter. But he was talking about St. Thomas Aquinas, and he was talking about how he went about conflict. And he went about conflict, opposing ideas, that kind of thing, in taking pains to understand every last piece of somebody else's viewpoint. And all his questions were directed at understanding where they were coming from. And he said something along the lines of, and it's been years since I read it, but he said something along the lines of 90% of the time when I did that, the conflict dissipated
Mm.
because I took the time to understand where the person was coming from. And I think that's what's missing in our world. What we love to do is create straw man arguments, prop up this false idea of this thing that I believe or this thing that I am or that kind of thing, and then I attack it with ad hominem arguments.
Right.
That's what our world does. That's it. And that's not knowing and being known. That's not love.
Well, this goes back to the very beginning where we're talking about making assumptions that we make assumptions that other people have shared our experiences.
Mhm.
And and I know, okay, this is thanks for broadcasting to the world my lack of curiosity in this conversation that I had with the client. Anyway, but um, like
You're welcome.
um, if anybody question whether I'm perfect, here's the answer. My wife can also answer, and kids can answer this for you. Um, the but it's a now I completely lost my train of thought because I really had something interesting to say. Um,
Straw man arguments, ad hominem attacks.
by my own self-admission, sometimes I feel quite lazy. Like I don't want to take the time. It's work, honestly.
Mhm.
Let me explain how I came to this conclusion,
Yep.
especially when you don't have somebody else who's asking curious questions. But they want to know, but they don't know how to ask the questions. And conversely, it's work to go ask the questions and to figure out, okay, so like, where did this come from? And how do you come to that conclusion? And what was the origin of that? And how do you arrive there? And what was and it also takes, well, on both sides. I'm jumping back from side to side. When somebody asks you those questions, how do you not feel threatened? What if you've never thought of it before? Can you honestly say, I haven't thought about that before? When when somebody gives you that answer, can you um, can you when somebody tells you that they haven't thought about a certain aspect, can you let it rest? Can you give them time to think about it, or do are you you know a hound dog looking for a bite of flesh that you can sink your teeth into?
Yeah, the bone that you can stick to, attack, keep
I mean, you
guard with
can
all with your life.
exactly you could really rip somebody apart at that point.
Well, yeah, the fascinating thing to me is as you're talking is like what happens when my 10,000 hours of expertise in whatever area comes into conflict with your 10,000 hours of expertise?
That's fascinating.
What happens?
Well, we can even reframe it a little bit differently. What happens if you look at that as a conflict of 10,000 hours instead of looking at it as an opportunity for 20,000 hours?
Right. Maybe that's the turning point. Maybe that's the switch. Maybe that's the metanoia, the changing of thinking, the repentance that Jesus is talking about constantly. Paul's talking about, everybody's talking about in the New Testament, the metanoia, the changing of minds. You could either continue to viciously hold on to your 10,000 hours of experience as the end all be all of all existence,
Right.
or you could add to that 10,000 hours another 5,000 wrestling with that concept. In a sense of, I read this thing this morning. Somebody had posted this article. It was from Proverbs, and essentially, what it was saying was, don't waste your breath on fools. Don't throw your pearls of wisdom before the swine. If somebody is absolutely tied to their 10,000 hours of expertise, they are going to defend it with everything they are, and they are not going to let go. So why would you waste your breath? Back to the Paulo Coelho quote that I said a few maybe a month ago or so, whatever. Like, my friends don't need an explanation, and my enemies won't listen.
Right.
Why would I be in that position of trying to share my thought process and my experience when you are so bound to your 10,000 hours of expertise? It's a waste of time. So why would I have that conversation?
Well, so okay, so the world falls into three categories. Number one, people who are generally open, and this is obviously not universal, but generally open. I mean, it's not all times, all situations, but generally open to conflicting experiences through 10,000 hours. Mm. Right? Number two, people who are use their 10,000 hours as a filter, but who are willing to work with you because their 10,000 hours agrees with your 10,000 hours. And then the third being the people whose 10,000 hours disagree with your 10,000 hours and aren't willing to work with you.
Right.
Um, so the last one's a net negative.
Hmm.
It really not possible to do much of anything there.
Right.
The second one is basically just a net zero. Like there's really, I mean, yeah, there's or maybe it's some level of addition, but it's not. It has no multiplying effect.
Right. It's arithmetic.
Arithmetic.
You may get plus one, plus two, minus one, minus two, step forward, step back, but there may be a net moving forward, there may be a net moving backwards, just depending on the response of the individual in the situation.
Yep.
Yep.
Um, and then the first one that I mentioned is really where the opportunity for insight occurs.
Mhm. Can you live in that space of being open to building on that 10,000 hours, learning, being humble, being curious? Are you open to that?
Okay, what leads to the fatigue that ends curiosity?
Mm. Gut reaction? Fear. Fear of separation. Fear of not being enough. If you sit down and talk with people long enough and you get into depth of conversation, inevitably you're going to find the places where human beings hold on tightest somehow related to the idea of I'm not enough. Inevitably. You can take all the Freudian psychology, you can take all the spiritual direction techniques, you can take all these things that we do to try and perfect ourselves, and it really ends up being somewhat simple to identify. Somewhere along the way, you got scared because you weren't enough, and that threatened disconnection, and now that thing has become an idol to you.
Right.
Simply diagnosed or observed from an objective observer, simply diagnosed or observed. That's not the hard part. The hard part is getting somebody to understand why they made that designation and walking with them as they get clarity on it, and then walking with them as they develop the strength to challenge that narrative. That's the really long work. Long in
Right.
the sense of it's not instant as much as we would like it to be.
or as easy as we would like.
Yeah, because it honestly means confronting the beast that you never wanted to confront. There's a reason why the beast was in the cage.
Right. So let me repeat this back in some capacity. So okay, so in this scenario, I can we can self-analyze. I think one of the dangers of putting yourself into a position of some kind of expertise and is that if expertise is the reason for your involvement, then your value is only welcome as much as your opinion exists, right?
Yes.
Like it's
Is
and so
accepted or valued or
accepted or
yeah,
valued. If it's not accepted or valued, then inherently the reason for you being there isn't doesn't exist anymore.
right.
Now, there are other ways of doing commerce, such as yes, there's always expertise that's required in some capacity, but if the predominant reason comes down to your values, who you are as a person, what's important to you, your way of your frame through which you make decisions. And as long as those values are integrous to who you are, and if that's the one of the primary reasons for you to be present, then the pressure comes off of being right. And it shifts into saying we do have we might not have everything in common, we might not agree, but we do have some things that are in common and we can be here, coexist here because we share this common ground.
Right. 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 What
Well,
I what I hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is if your value is in being right, then you're in an arithmetic game. You're going to be plus one, you're going to be minus one, and it's always this tally sheet. And you're hoping to have more pluses than minuses. In fact, you hate the minuses and you avoid them with everything you are. Being right means being plus, 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 plus. And you violently react against being wrong, which is a negative, because that messes with the balance sheet. That's one way. The other way is seeing curiosity as the guide. Not that I know, but I'm curious to find out. There is no tally sheet there because nobody's counting. At least internally, the individual with that mindset is not counting because it's not about winning or losing. It's about knowing myself, knowing others, knowing the nature of reality, coming to understand. There's no tally sheet there. Think about like in an infinitely connected space, everything is common knowledge and it's shared. There is no withholding.
right.
You were describing, I don't know, way back in the beginning, and it struck me then, and it's striking me now. Like there's those who gather information, and they keep it to themselves because it's a form of safety and security. Because I can be right when others are wrong. That's a that's an Enneagram 5 heaven, which actually is hell, but we perceive it as heaven.
That's very
But what drives somebody to be in that place where I have to be right? Somewhere along the way, somebody wasn't curious with that individual about who they are and what they think. They were probably pretty consistently told that they were wrong, they were wrong, they were wrong. And there wasn't a conversation about it. And so the obsession, the idol, became gathering information to protect myself in case somebody tells me I'm wrong again.
Right.
It's all very human here. And yet we want to act as if it's not. It's all very flawed.
There's a sense in which tell me what field you're in, and I'll tell you your dysfunction.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's pretty easy to identify. And the poor in spirit looks at it and goes, yeah, that's me. Like the trope around helping professionals, therapists, counselors, spiritual directors, is they get into that to avoid dealing with their own stuff.
Right.
And it's true,
Yep.
at least in the beginning, hopefully. Hopefully, at some point, you become self-aware enough to recognize that this is a mirror and what this person is saying. I'm going, oh, wow, I struggle with that. I need to think about that. And it becomes this curious exploration there. Best case scenario.
Yep.
But some become so entrenched in being right.
And that's where you encounter a lot of the harm that comes through therapy and people helping.
Right. That I have to be right.
Yep.
And the mantra or the idea within, somebody who's sitting in front of you expecting you to be right. And you can say a million and one times, I am not right. I don't have the answers. I'm curious. I'm walking with you. I'm asking questions. I'm a companion. You could say that a million and one times, and still the person will have in their head that this person is right.
Which also ties right back to some of my early comments. It's shockingly difficult to discern voices, any voice, our
Right.
own, somebody else's,
Gods,
God's. Like first,
is this
who?
me? Is this my context? Is this my 10,000 hours speaking? Is it? And I think that that thought process is so utterly healthy to wrestle with it. It's the fool that goes, nope, this is God. I know. Okay. Or nope, this is me. I know.
Well, in some sense, there's this. Well, I mean, you could make an argument that this is one of the deepest underlying issues of humanity. Look at Adam and Eve. Like their most fundamental breakdown involved the inability to discern voices through whatever capacity. And yes, they knew where it was coming from, but they didn't have a capacity. They're not they're I'm being very sloppy with my words here. They um, they didn't fit by whatever means. They listened to the wrong voice. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. I heard this. I heard this clip, and it was from years ago. And this reporter approaches a pastor who's part of the prosperity gospel movement, that kind of thing. And at an airport, and he's coming off his private jet. And the reporter asks, "Why do you fly private jets?" And straight faced, this pastor looked at the reporter and says, "Because God told me I can't be around the spiritual environment that's in a commercial airliner. so I have to fly private.
That's
And I laughed because otherwise I was going to cry. Like seriously? Like that that's the reasoning? I heard God's voice. He said, "Don't fly commercial, fly private."
so I have a genuine question. The sick are the ones who need the doctor. Like, I mean, this person. Okay, let's lay this out. This person isn't here to defend themselves. We can't ask them curious conversations about how they came to that conclusion.
Yes.
Um, do we see any instances of Jesus separating himself from people besides perhaps to get away to spend time with his father and not completely be suffocated by.
If it exists, I haven't seen it.
I mean, there's it reminds me of a YouTube video I saw this week too of a an evangelist sharing the gospel and talked about this drunk guy they were praying for and shared the gospel with and was following them around and was being a bother and how basically he had an evangelism bouncer to distract the drunk guy so that other people could get saved. Um, which
Did you say evangelism bouncer?
that's what that is what I called him, yes.
That is so good. Evangelism bouncer. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Oh, that made my morning. Anyways, sorry, I interrupted you.
It's all good. I mean, it's the same question. How how do we? It makes logical sense. I can't even say the word, but it makes sense. The math makes sense on why you would say, let's go talk to people who want to come to Christ and let's not deal with the drunk guy.
Right.
And yet,
Maybe that's the very guy you need to be spending your time with.
it is a very curious situation.
Right. Like, what's your mission in that moment? I guess is the question I would ask. What is your thought process? Like, what's your mission? What's your goal?
Kevin, my mission is souls.
Okay. Okay. Is the drunk guy not a soul?
Yeah, I mean, but I don't know how to visibly help the drunk guy.
Yeah. Right.
There's no I can lead other people who are
There's
ready
no
to pray.
quick fix there.
There's no quick fix there. I can lead other people to pray a prayer, come to my event or church or Bible study or whatever it is, but I don't know what to do with the drunk guy.
Yeah. And I get it to a certain extent. You come across these situations and you look at it and you go, oh, wow, this is a mess.
Right.
I get it. What am I stepping into here? Get it.
Well, there's also this case. Jesus had situations where okay, this is a question I personally want the answer to. So, warning. How do you manage the crowds? Because we've all been in situations where, okay, I experienced this as a father. I'll be honest. This is why I want to know. The
Mm.
crowd, you manage the crowd. It's like sometimes you've got three kids screaming bloody murder at the same time, and you just triage because I'm not God. Like, okay, you're upset because I don't know, your chocolate rolled under the couch, and you're upset because I don't know, busted your head open. Like, all right, we're gonna deal with the head. you'll get a rear chocolate, maybe. Um,
We'll put some money in a therapy jar, and
yeah, right, exactly.
in 20 years from now, you could tell somebody about how my dad didn't help me when the chocolate went under the couch.
Because my kid was a knucklehead and gashed the forehead open. I mean, I don't know what. Sorry, whatever it was. Um, these are all fictitious, by the way, fictitious situations. But the scenario is real, and it's not just parenting. It's like I would expect this evangelist experience it in some capacity on the streets. Like if you have some kind of notoriety and curiosity. I mean, I experience this sometimes in foreign countries. It depends how accustomed they were to seeing white people, but this by very definition, if you're a foreigner, means you must be rich because you got here, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, like who is this guy? And then you're just like, everybody wants to be your friend. Can I try my English on you? Like,
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know if I can speak. I don't know if I can understand your English or not. Like, and do you know that there's 30 other people who want to do the same thing? And that, you know, you experience this as a pastor, when, especially a pastor larger than a living room. Like,
Hmm.
but even within a living room, suddenly two people are going through a crisis. How do you pastor them if you're pastor of a bigger church? Now you have the responsibility of leadership, leading an organization, but you also have the expectation that people kind of put on you of like, man, I really want my pastor to know me and care for me. And it's like, that's a lot. You
Hmm.
have celebrities, YouTube, social media, like all of these places where people go around and it's like, um, I mean, I've seen so many stories where somebody's like they walk through airports with like hoodies over their faces in hopes that
Yeah.
nobody recognizes because the first person who recognizes them, there's going to be a line of 20 people. So what do you want to do? Be late for your flight, act
Hmm.
like a total jerk,
Hmm.
and be videoed being a total jerk.
Yeah.
It puts you into an impossible situation. So
Yeah. Completely impossible.
completely impossible. And so um I'm trying I'm failing. The snarky comment in my mind is clearly this preacher was not able to get on an airplane without people lining up from front to back to ask for his autograph. Um it was very sarcastic. It just
Yeah.
um I mean but it's possible. We don't
Could
know
be.
this situation. How do you deal humanly when the demands that are placed on you exceed your capacity?
Right.
Besides just grin and bear it, and with God, I can do everything.
Yeah. I think it's really, I think it's a fascinating question. Really fascinating. My mind immediately goes to that individual, that person who's out there on the street evangelizing, talking to people, that kind of thing. They put themselves in a very vulnerable position. I wouldn't go so far as to say sheep amongst wolves, but just sheer numbers. It's you and it's everybody else, you know?
Right?
That's a very vulnerable position. I guess I would look at the motivation for why. Like the true heart motivation. Why are you out there? Why are you doing this? Because I think the why matters infinitely.
Hmm.
If I have the right why, no matter what I experience, I'm going to see it through a certain lens. If I have the wrong why, then the collapse is coming in just a matter of time. So, what is the right why? And what's the wrong why? And maybe it goes back to separation versus union. If I am out there with a union mindset, with love as the basis of what I'm doing, with knowing and being known as the motivation, then I'm going to be able to think clearly. I'm going to be able to make decisions. I'm going to be able to discern. And I'm going to know boundaries. I'm going to know when it's enough, when it's too much.
Right.
If I'm there with the separation mindset, with the 3D view, with competition, with being right, with standing out, with all those kinds of things, then I'm going to burn out. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. When will I burn out? And so it may be an oversimplification, and certainly there's subtlety and nuance to all of these situations. But for me, it comes back to being able to be honest with yourself, and knowing your motivation, and being able to be honest about it.
Mhm.
If if you are out on the street with the bullhorn proclaiming the gospel, what's your heart motivation? And only you can answer that. We could make judgments about that person, but really, the judgment is just a confession.
Right.
Only that person knows what their motivation is.
Only only that person knows what their known motivation is. Can I be that particular?
Yeah.
Because there have been plenty of times in my life where, to the best of my knowledge, my motivations were pure,
Hmm.
good, clean. And with time and with perspective, I've come to realize that there was a gnawing need that I was trying to fulfill that I wasn't aware of. But I wasn't aware that that's what I was doing. So to that stage of growth and development, and with the knowledge that I had, I was doing the best that I knew. But I wouldn't say that the motive was you know, I mean, maybe it was good but not excellent. I don't know how you define that, but
Right. Maybe part of the foundational thing we have to come to is acknowledging that in this human realm, there is no such thing as a pure motive.
and maybe our goal then, if that's not the case, then our goal can't be to have a pure motive. So then the goal is to be accountable to what we know and recognize and understand.
To allow there to be the space that even in my purest of motives, there's going to be a piece of ego in that.
Yeah.
To allow that to be the case. So I can't play these internal games in my head of my motives are pure, 100% pure. I'm right. No, you're not. Nobody ever in the history of humankind, except for one, ever had pure motives. It was always a hybrid. It was always an alloy. Always. And can you be humble enough to acknowledge that? Can you know yourself well enough to say, I may not know right now what the impurity is, but I know myself well enough to know that it is not pure gold here.
You really are on this haunting question binge right now.
I am.
No, but like in
It's all my walks with Clive. We walk around the neighborhood and these things just pop into my head and he's just loving his thing, doing his thing, and I'm just like haunting questions just keep popping up.
like I've had some of these. There are situations where I know there's something distorted about my motivation here, but I can't put my finger on it yet. Like I don't know what it is. And I think I think we have to recognize this as the grace of awakening, like that God works with us slowly and gently and in our capacity and in his timing um and he's patient and not threatened by this. But it's also a reminder to stay curious about it so that this question doesn't like don't just silence the question, let it haunt you.
Let it haunt you. Let it be the other presence in the room. And instead of ignoring the other presence in the room, allow yourself to have a conversation with it. I I've had this storage unit for probably 5 years. And it's, I don't know, somewhere between 150, $200 a month. And it's just stuff that held on to, don't need to, like haven't looked in there in 3 years. So yesterday I go and I look inside and I'm looking at it. I'm like, why did I decide I needed to keep this stuff? What is this here? And I'm like going through stuff, and there's certain stuff. Oh yeah, I forgot I had that. I need that. Da, 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 all that kind of stuff. And I'm just looking at it, going, I had convinced myself for years that what was inside here was like pure gold, needed to be locked behind a door and protected. And I go through it and I go, there's some stuff in there, but I had to like rifle through things and pick things out, and just I just decided that I'm just emptying out this unit, getting rid of it. I'm emptying it out, and maybe that's what it's like internally. Like maybe we have these storage units inside us that the
Mhm.
gold is hidden behind this locked door, and I don't go there and look at it because it's gold. Of course, you're going to protect gold. What if I open that door? And I just commit to not necessarily going through the whole storage unit, but one box. What's in here? And see what's there. Maybe that's the same thing internally with these haunting questions. Can I just sit in the room with that haunting question and have a conversation with it?
Well, and I think a question to ask with that is, I love doing math I do this stuff on my. It's becoming a lot easier than as I've become more attentive. But I love doing subscription purges, and if I can cancel, 200 bucks a month in 30 minutes, or whatever the number is, it's fun to math it out to like, this is how much money I generated, and this is the dollars per hour I generated across a year. Like,
Yeah,
is it worth paying $550, $400, 150 a month for 3 years to hang on to
right.
stuff that you don't need? Like, what's the cost of the story? And I'm not, it's not an indictment. It's like, I think more than anything, it's revealing that most of the things that we carry, okay, most of the, I have a friend of mine who pointed out the fascination that a lot of people with ADHD have around hoarding and watching hoarders, um,
Hmm.
which my wife will attest to. Like there's a limit, but there's a point in which you just want to dip your toe in the water and go like, why? What makes people hoard this much? But what you do with your material possessions often ends up being some reflection of what's going on internally.
Right.
And many of the things that you're hanging on to have a story that you haven't fully addressed or answered. Um, and so if this is the cost of external clutter, external baggage that we're hanging on to, what are the other things that you're carrying in your internal storage closet? The chocolate rolling under the couch that
Right.
is a very real thing, but it's
Right.
costing you to carry it.
Right. And what does it look like to, I think it's too extreme to say lay it down, in the beginning, but what about considering laying it down? There's this lady, Japanese lady, I forget what her name was, but she had some Netflix specials a number of years ago where she would help people organize their house. And her methodology was to hold the thing and to feel like whether this was valuable to you, there was emotional reaction to it, the whatever. If there wasn't, fold it up, put it in the giveaway. And maybe that's a very similar process to what we need to do emotionally, internally. I hold this thing, the reality of it before me. This is the thing I'm holding on to. How do I feel about this? Can I can I put this away or for another time?
Right.
Can we be honest enough with ourselves on that level? And I think to bring it back full circle, that's what takes us out of our 10,000 hours is in small ways questioning the presuppositions, the ideals that we've held on to, questioning them.
Right.
That's what I think breaks us out of our expertise.
Well, you and I have had conversations throughout the years of what, I don't know, like, existential life questions, like, what should I do with my life? Um, but I will observe that for myself personally, where I am today and how I'm spending my time is far better suited to me than it was 5, 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
The reason being was the willingness to, well, the parts that have gone well have been the parts where I've had the patience to endure and the wisdom to question individual pieces and say, why am I hanging on to this piece? Can I let this piece go to make room for something else? Not a giant bombshell in the middle of my life, dropping whatever. Then not to blow up everything, but just to the gradual, continual process of surrender. And for so what the question then becomes, what does it look like in terms of union with God to gradually turn over little pieces, one box at a time, one piece at a time, one not even just maybe the first step isn't giving up, maybe just one step is just holding it with him.
Oh, right. That's it. That's it. The first step is holding it with him. Like, and sometimes for us as human beings, we need something tangible to hold. So quite often with people, I'll use like a picture. Find a picture of yourself when you were such and such an age. Just hold the picture. Look at the picture. Allow God into that space with you while you're holding the picture. Well, what's that supposed to do? That's not the point. It's not the doing that's the point. It's the experience. Just holding the picture. This didn't do anything. This is dumb. Okay. You didn't have the experience. It's just an experience of holding something tangible and real. It's a sacrament.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. I was thinking about, thought about quite often, the movie Slumdog Millionaire. When I saw that the first time, I was like, oh, great movie, wonderful, all that kind of stuff. Just a very heart-wrenching, triumphant, like all the things, the story. And as I saw it a few other times, what I started to recognize is there's something really profound there. If you look at this boy on this game show, every answer he gives comes from an experience he has had in life. His own personal genius was put on display via going back to his experiences and being able to interpret them.
Mhm.
Maybe that's our personal genius, our becoming who we are, our learning from those lessons, our being curious, our being willing to hold them. Like that is the idea. What's life about? Learning from your experiences, allowing those things to shape us into union. Maybe that's the point.
Yeah. And jumping back, this is repeating, but jumping back, maybe the temptation is no, the temptation is, I'm convinced, and I'm not going to let you offer a counter perspective, Kevin, because that's not what we do here. Um, the temptation is to let the game show be the pinnacle.
Yes,
Well, I've been on the game show. Have you not seen my game show?
right,
Yes. And did you continue living after your game show or not?
right.
It's the challenge.
That's the challenge. Was that the pinnacle of your experience? There's guys I went to high school with who, years after they'd graduated, they went to college, got their teaching degrees, went back to the high school, taught there, coached sports there, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. I'm not saying that. But they'd also show up at high school parties. This is curious to me. And not in a judgmental way, but why? That's where you felt best. That's what
Mhm.
you're trying that's where you felt most in tune, whatever the case may be. And not to
Right.
be judgmental about it, but just to understand there was something very appealing to you about that environment at that time. And not just shame it, but to understand it. Like you went on the game show.
Hmm.
And you won at the game show, whatever winning looks like.
Yep.
And I want to re-experience that.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is
There's
where I felt, this is where I felt like I had won. This is where I felt good about myself. This is where I felt whatever. So I pigeonhole myself into that place.
because I can't, or either I can't imagine another place where I would, or I have looked a lot of other places, and for whatever reason, those
Haven't
environments
found it.
found it.
Not to judge it, but just to be curious about it. Wow. Tell me what that was like. Searching for all those other places where you did fit in, where you did have a very similar experience and not finding it. What has that been like for you?
Right.
Most often as human beings, we like to use shame as corrective behavior to correct behavior. And
Right.
it never works.
Yeah.
It increases the burden actually.
Yeah. Hmm. Well, I think that there's a lot. There's a lot in there. There's a lot to think about. I I think I'm gonna, yeah, let the haunting questions chase me this week, and see what I run from and what I run to.
Right. Right. I saw this movie. I don't know, it was a really cheesy, bad movie, but it was just on and I was watching it. And this guy's in a bar and there's a guy sitting next to him. And one of the guys is having a real struggle and that kind of thing. And at some point, the conversation comes to what is a good man? What makes a man good? And one of the guys says, well, to me, what makes a man good is what he runs to and what he runs from. And that determines whether that's a good man or not. I think at the end of the day, if we run to union, if we run to God, if that's our safe place, if that's where we go to learn, like you're a good man.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a identity that's cemented in place. I think it's a moment by moment exercise of what am I running to,
Right.
moment by moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Enough to chew on for this week, right?
That's enough to chew on for this week. Well, so to all of you guys listening, once again, super grateful um, for you guys. Welcome your feedback and feel free to continue following the conversations and the journey through whatever platform that you choose. Spotify, Substack, YouTube. We're actually on TikTok. Have been for a number of weeks, which isn't bad for two old guys, Kevin. Um,
Thank you,
um,
Haley.
yeah, thank you, Haley. So go ahead if you go ahead. You can do all that stuff. You know how to do that. And we welcome your feedback and appreciate you joining us on this journey. So with that, always a pleasure, Kevin. Till next time.
Till next time.